You're good, Maria.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, everyone. This is a work session of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is March 10th, 2026. Thank you. The first item is roll call. Joe Murphy.
Here.
Liz.
Here.
Caper.
Here.
Armand.
Here.
Susan.
Here.
Robin.
Here.
And Maria Mack is here. If anyone else needs a copy of the agenda, I have extra copies. Anyone else? There's a couple.
Thank you.
Our first agenda item is a recommendation to the town council. There was a zoning text amendment request for Palisades Mill to amend the town's zoning ordinance to permit restaurants without alcohol sales in the town's Industrial 1 district. Jamie, do you want to say?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we do have the applicant's representative here as well as the applicant. I don't want to steal their presentation, but from every perspective, just background-wise, if you recall, some of the members who have been on the board for a few years, that the Rhode Island legislature changed some of the dynamics associated with the administration of your zoning regulations when they made a statement in the law that said if you didn't have very specific criteria for special use or special permit applications, you basically can't enforce the special use kind of application process. As a planning board, you went with the planning department and legal, we went through all of the use codes and eliminated a lot of uses that were kind of unique and special that we didn't have specific criteria for. Restaurants and industrial zones were one of those uses. And the discussion then was, well, if someone someday wants to do that, because we weren't aware of any, as long as the regulation existed, that actually utilized it, they would come back, in all likelihood, propose the text amendment, and the planning department would work with them on criteria. So you have an application before you proposing to put restaurants as a use without alcohol back into that Industrial 1 district, and that's what's before you. So that's a quick summary of what the application is about.
I have a question. The applicant, as I understand it, is talking about a property at 1070 Kingstown Road, but is the proposed amendment for all Industrial 1 districts or just that one property?
Industrial 1 district.
So
The applicant's business is located at that address.
okay. And I guess I don't know, I neglected to look where all the other Industrial 1 districts are located. I'm familiar with the applicant's property, but I'm not familiar with the overall area. How broad are we talking about?
I can get you the specifics on that, but again, going back to what I presented, you had this in regulations before with no standards.
So this would include Offset Fairground?
That's an IND1, yes. You also have the mill on 108 across from the pump house, which is an IND1. And I believe the sand and gravel banks and the cement is IND1 also. So there are a few other isolated ones, but those are your primary larger ones.
And I was going to ask for a clarification from Andy to what Caper alluded to, the fact that there is an applicant for this, but it's actually for all of those zones as a whole.
So again, Madam Chair, as I mentioned, the applicant is here as long as their legal counsel.
Yes,
Good evening, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much. Michael Monti of Sarina there, and I'm joined by the principal of Palisades LLC, Eric Thunberg. So I think Jamie's summation of this was very well put. In 2023, the municipality prohibited this use in the Industrial 1 district. I don't think they did it because it was a bad use, but the municipality needed to rewrite half of its zoning code, come up with criteria, And so like many other municipalities, they were reactive and said, well, for uses we don't think people are actually engaging in, let's not go through that process, and let's work on what's really in front of us. So now we're before you requesting that this be re-added into the ordinance. We have to request that it apply to the whole industrial 1 district as it did before. And so we think we've come up with some smart criteria for the use. So it would be by special use permit only. In order to make sure things don't really get out of control, not that they would, but if there's a concern about other industrial 1 districts, we decided it made sense to say only 1 restaurant per tax lot in that district, and that it be limited to 2,500 square feet of land area. We also wrote in some prohibitions about outdoor dining to the extent anyone would want to do that in the future. We don't think we would, but we know that could be a concern in the industrial 1 district. So making sure there's buffers between residential areas. And then otherwise, the special use criteria just says that, you know, you need to submit an architectural plan and a parking plan. And that's really it. And it's for restaurant use without the sale of alcohol. And I think the planning board at this level, you're making a recommendation to the town council and looking at whether it's consistent with the intents and purposes of zoning, and also whether it's consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. And if you take a look at the comprehensive land use plan, I included some excerpts in your material. It actually identifies the industrial 1 district on the future land use map as sort of a mixed use industrial commercial area. And there are actually specific quotations in the comp plan that say Peacedale, where this particular industrial 1 zone is appropriate as a quote commercial mixed use zone to more appropriately reflect the current and intended diverse set of uses. So we hope this is a straightforward petition, and then somewhere down the line we'll be back before either you or the zoning board, if this petition is approved by the town council, with an actual proposal to put a relatively small restaurant in the mill, which we think is a good idea because it will have complementary. It'll be complementary to the other uses in the mill. Whaler's Brewery is there. There's the rock climbing gym, and then there's also some more office businesses, Morton Defense Group, Low Tide Jewelry. I think they might also do some light manufacturing in there. So it's a really nice complex. My client purchased it about 15 years ago, and it was vacant, and it's really thriving now. But we want the ability to add what we think is, a low intensity use that'll be very complementary and add to the fabric of the community, which is a small restaurant. And that's the petition in a nutshell.
Can you talk a little bit more about your requirements as far as your ideas go in terms of architectural plans, parking plans, and buffers?
Yes, so if you it's attached to the letter I submitted, it's on page 16 of I actually just took the ordinance and added in red text what we're submitting in particular as the text amendment. And so what it says is condition A would be only one restaurant without the service of alcohol shall be permitted on any given tax lot in the industrial 1 district. The service area of the restaurant shall not exceed 2,500 square feet. All outdoor service areas, if any, shall be adequately screened from any abutting property that is zoned residential or used for residential purposes. Moreover, outdoor service areas, if any, shall not be located within 50 feet of any property line abutting property that is zoned residential or used for residential purposes. Dumpsters and/or other waste storage shall be screened from view on all sides and shall not be located within 20 feet of any lot line abutting property zoned residential or used for residential purposes. Parking shall be adequate to meet the zoning requirement for restaurant use as set forth in Article 7 of the zoning code, unless the applicant is granted a variance from the same. So parking is already set forth for restaurants. We didn't feel like it was appropriate to change that. And then condition E, the final condition, is that a detailed floor plan prepared by a licensed architect and a parking plan shall be submitted into the record to verify items B through D above. So to make sure that those are actually effectuated and come to fruition. And those are the criteria we proposed. We're open to feedback as well, but this is what we came up with.
Thanks. Questions, comments? Robin?
I'm thinking of the problem Narragansett's having with music and outdoor dining and residential neighbors.
Mhm.
Are you gonna put something in there that prohibits noise like that?
So I mean, we're certainly open to it. I think there's probably already a in the ordinance noise restrictions for the area.
It probably was in Narragansett too.
There was. I mean, I want to be clear. So the mill, we're trying to write an ordinance that works for the whole industrial one district. The restaurant that my client anticipates is going to be entirely indoors. So it's somewhat
Right, and I think it's a
challenging
great idea.
for
I
us to
like
come
it.
up. But
I'm
yeah,
thinking
we're not
of
opposed.
taking
we're not opposed to
advantage
that.
of the ordinance, right?
You know, I'm not sure what the decibel level should be, but I think it would be sensible to add that to the extent there is any outdoor music, that it end at a certain hour. But I'm just not sure what the ordinance currently says about that. Like, it might already be fairly restrictive.
Don't you think the 50-foot setback is sufficient for the normal use? If there's gonna be any outdoor entertainment, they're gonna have to get an entertainment license from the council. And there'll be a hearing. So that's the time when restrictions as to hours are usually placed by the council in the context of an entertainment license. Or it might be, if someone came in and asked for it, they might be granted for indoor only, with the windows and doors closed while the entertainment's going on, depending on that. But for the basic restaurant activities, they've got that 50-foot setback from, and it's actually very broad because it said residential zone or residential use. So if there's a residential use on the next door property, even if it's still zoned industrial, they would have to have that setback.
What would a residential use be?
Somebody living there, a resident.
How's that different than residential?
Because a residential zone just said these are the zones, you could have a legal non-conforming use, for example, in the IND zone. I don't think we have much in Peacedale, but there are places where you end up having homes or residences in industrial zones.
Yeah,
So,
I remember there, I don't know what the resolution was, or if it was actually zoned industrial, but the pump house issue came about a few years ago.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking of. What's the complex across from the pump house? Is that impacted by the industrial one? I think,
That is industrial
It
ones.
is.
right, and it'll,
so if we allow a restaurant, if we approve the zoning ordinance, we're allowing a restaurant in that complex as well, across from the pump house. The neighbors are already
Already complaining.
upset, yeah.
But they'd have to get a special use
Right,
permit.
so it'd be an S in the table, not a Y. So it's a special use
Got it.
permit rather than by right.
Mhm.
Thus
Which
the
is-
criteria.
Hard to push.
It's a slippery slope.
I mean, we're used to getting pushed around a little.
50 foot's not a lot relative to noise. So I guess, Andy, what you're saying is if they had a restaurant that was approved outside the 50 foot from the buffer, if they wanted to have any type of amplified music outside, that would fall outside the restaurant, they'd have to come back to the town hall, or?
they would have to come to, yes, they would need an entertainment license if they're gonna have any kind of entertainment, a DJ, any kind of band, karaoke.
Anything
Bingo.
Anything that's amplified?
Right, yes.
And
the
that's
fi-
not allowed by right in a restaurant, right now.
It is, but you have to get a license. You have to get a separate license from the council for that.
And when you talk about the 50 feet, that does not necessarily mean 50 feet that should or could be buffered by vegetation, which often mitigates sound.
I pictured it as parking even.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just the idea of not having the rest, I mean, you know, you're having people talking, you're having knives and forks clanging or things like that. That's what the 50 feet is
Right,
for.
but the 50 feet's not necessarily a sound buffer.
No, absolutely not. But this is an industrial zone. It's not a sound buffer from anybody who's doing manufacturing in this building either.
The brewery makes a lot more noise than sometimes than music.
And I think there's a little bit of flexibility because in the criteria we've proposed, we say service area shall not exceed 2,500 square feet. And then
You say this says 3,000.
you're
in
looking
mine.
at a prior.
All right, I just wanted to clarify.
And then all outdoor service areas, if any, shall be adequately screened from any abutting property that is zoned residential or used for residential purposes. That's in addition to the 50-foot prohibition. So that sentence, all outdoor service areas, if any, shall be adequately screened. That's a criteria that you have to go before either the zoning board or the planning board under unified review. And you could look at an application and say, hey, your plan actually calls for an outdoor service area. Our criteria says adequately screened. What's your screening plan? So the 50 feet is really just to say it absolutely can't be within 50 feet of these property lines, but that doesn't mean you can't also ensure that there's other forms of adequate screening and buffers. So I think the criteria allows for that flexibility on a special use permit. We're not particularly concerned with it because we don't plan to have it at our site, but obviously it's for the whole district.
So I have a question for, so Jamie, I printed out one of the versions of the 504.21, which has the 3,000 square feet, and it doesn't talk about adequately buffered. How many different, I think I must not have the right version
Might
of
be an
this.
earlier one?
Yeah, there was
Sim-
a revised version that was submitted after the applicant met with staff.
Okay. So, so this one I have isn't useful. How many, has everyone seen a new
No.
version that has, could we grab a copy of?
is the version in the staff report, I think.
Because this is the one I got off the,
Everything goes electronic to you in your agenda packet.
okay, there were 3 different versions of this, and I chose the wrong one.
Electronic to you in
All right,
your-
I'll see if I can pull up my
So
phone.
adequately screened, just what does that mean?
I'll just try and clarify. There's an industrial zone that exists today that doesn't regulate noise, that doesn't regulate landscaping, that doesn't regulate buffers, that they're proposing to add another use to it that adds an additional layer of criteria, buffering, noise, and permit.
I heard that, but
Criteria.
what is
It's not
sufficient screening? Is it just
as
that
defined by
plastic
the
you put on a
planning board
fence?
at the time of application.
I think so. Our intent,
Because you can't say 25 feet. 25 feet may be appropriate if it's first floor and not an elevation change. What if it's a restaurant on a second floor? That 25 feet may be sufficient. So you need to be able to react to the actual application before you. Which, again, I'm not a fan always as a planning director, or someone who has to look at code compliance to, we'll call it some vagueness. But I think in this scenario, you can't pre-predict the location of a proposed restaurant within a mill complex. It could be on the first floor, could be on the second floor, it could be on a rooftop. And then, in each one of those scenarios, the buffering, screening changes. And I think you need to have a planning board and a zoning board who is able to react to that, and the regulations are in place to do so.
So would it be clear to any future applicant and the town council that if it says adequately screened, it would give the planning board the flexibility to determine what that might be per individual application?
That's the current
Thank
language
you.
if you want to pass it around.
Thanks.
Thank you. I just brought it up on my phone.
Which is, I think, what you just said, Jamie.
Yeah, and again, we can, as it goes to the town council, we can clarify that language.
So Jamie, question for you. So the criteria is to have a parking plan. When they have a parking plan, would that typically include lighting for the parking and or lighting for walkways? Or
Yes.
should that criteria say parking and lighting, exterior lighting plan?
It's all, our site plan requires lighting to be included.
Okay, walkways as well as the parking itself.
Again, if they're, use an example, Joe, if they were proposing a parking lot that's on the other side of one of the canals, we've had conversations that if you're using that parking lot to meet a standard with regards to the spaces and
Yeah.
mixed uses, you need a clear pedestrian path between that proposed parking lot and the proposed uses, and that needs to be safe, it needs to potentially have railings, it needs to be lighted, and that lighting needs to be night sky compliant. All of that comes in under the site plan requirements and criteria.
Can you just clarify, early on in your narrative, you said that there would be a prohibition of outdoor dining? Then later on, it
So it's a-
refers to
yeah, it's
outdoor
a-
service, so.
It's a prohibition within 50 foot of a property line that's residential or zoned residential. So that's like you absolutely can't be within 50 feet of a residential property.
Okay.
But also, the zoning board or the planning board, depending on who's reviewing it, can say, well, gee, you know, that's a pretty densely residential area that you're across from. If you have outdoor dining, can you explain to us how you're adequately screening this and you're gonna mitigate for any noise impact? And then the burden will be on the petitioner in that instance to show that to the board's satisfaction. So you have, well, you know it's never gonna be 50 feet, and then you also have flexibility with what you wanna require on any given petition for what type of screening makes sense, because it can be different on any application depending on where it's located. And again, it's somewhat challenging for us just because it's not something we envision for our plans, but we do realize we have to submit an ordinance that applies to the entire Industrial 1
Yep.
district. Although there are only, I think, maybe only 3 Industrial 1 districts, and they're pretty small, so we're only talking about a few properties here.
Yeah, I want, just to go back to that, because again, the primary locations of the industrial districts are Fairgrounds Road. Then you come south on 108, south of URI. There's a small oil company on the west side of 108. Then you have the pump house, you have the mill across the street from the pump house. Then you come into Peacedale and you have the mill. And then you come down High Street and you have the mill at the intersection of High Street and Main Street. The other reference I made to the gravel banks and cement plants, that area, which is east of High Street on Broadbrook, those are IND2 and IND3.
And this is the Riverbend building too, right?
The Riverbend building.
On the corner of Columbia? Is that
also
IND one?
industrial, correct.
Okay.
But, you know, one of those complexes is mini storage, and the other one is warehousing and light manufacturing.
So I realize that we're doing this for all of the IND one. Could you explain a little bit about what you're thinking about doing, or what your client is thinking about doing at Palisades?
I can, but only in sort of general
Yeah, yeah.
terms because it's
Right.
very
It can only, it's.
it's very early.
Yeah.
So we don't currently have anyone under a lease agreement. We don't have a tenant, but the plan is to put in a relatively small restaurant in some space that is in close proximity to Whalers. So it'll be a small restaurant, not a big box type, not a large chain or anything like that. And the idea is that you'll be able to come to the mill. Maybe you're going to go rock climbing, then you can go to Whalers, and then hopefully you do it in that order. And then
That's a different issue.
Definitely.
and then you can stop and get you know, a bite to eat and just kind of keep people within the complex. Or perhaps someone who works at one of the offices that's there, they could get lunch there.
Yeah, to be honest,
these
I really
types
just
of
don't want to
things.
leave my office to get food, so I think it's
So is it so you have seating there at the restaurant, but a good amount of business would potentially be takeout to Whalers, right? Because I mean, you have to take out to eat at Whalers now.
Right.
Like there's no
right,
food
there's
service.
no food service.
So everyone
there.
gets food brought in.
People could do that, I suppose. People could also. I think the restaurants are probably going to want some of their business to stay, whatever tenant we go with.
Right. Like it wouldn't be like a Jade Bun where everything is to go, basically.
Correct. Yeah, it would not be just on everything to go. At least that's the current concept that I've been informed of. So yeah, but it's hard to say because I know the planning board is used to having like a fully fleshed out plan with the site plan and what is the business, and because we're just it's in such an early stage, we don't have all of that.
Yeah, this isn't development
But the idea
plan
is to just
review.
keep people
So.
at the broader mill complex
Yeah.
so that they can take advantage of everything that's there. And we think a restaurant is missing right now, and that it's complementary.
I think there's two portions where the language that is being proposed is good and is important. B and C makes a reference to abutting property that is zoned residential or used for residential purposes. Really important because we now know that industrial zone under certain criteria, meeting certain criteria, can have residential uses but not necessarily be zoned residential. So that was an important addition to this.
This is in the building, it's not a new building.
No, it's not me.
Such a beautiful building over there.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just put things in perspective, because everyone's like, what is 2,500 square feet, right? Everyone still maybe contemplating that. A typical Chili's or Ruby Tuesdays, Red Robin, if someone's been to one of those are typically between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet. So this is roughly half the size of a national chain sit-down restaurant. Whether it be Friendly's, Newport Creamery, Ruby Tuesdays, Chili's, Red Robin, those are the type of franchises. They're not proposing to do a national or corporate chain, but just in scale. If you went to Ruby Tuesdays in South County Commons, this is half the size of that.
So, do we need to consider the external appearance and or architecture of this sort of change to the mill? Because the mills are historic in character, and
Not
if
the
a rest,
mills, it's industrial. It's the whole
Yes.
industrial one, right?
right, but we're talking about the mill.
There are two different things here, though. I mean, I think they're looking for a zoning change.
Oh, no, I understand that. But if we're talking about a zoning change and we're using a historic mill that's been there for 200 years and has a look about it, do we need to have something in our works here where they can't bust out a wall and make it all glass and turn it into a Ruby Tuesdays? You know what I'm saying? In the middle of our historic mill.
Well, I know what you're saying, but
See, you brought it up.
see,
You-
to
you
me,
are-
the conundrum here is, it's easy to envision a restaurant in the mill complex.
Yes.
And I'm actually extremely supportive of that. It's the zoning change that I'm having more trouble with. And what you're talking about, you can't mix, you have to be careful about what we're imposing on the zoning change. We can't make the zoning change fit their property. We have to make the zoning change fit the industrial one usage throughout the town.
Right, you could have the proverbial blue metal building.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons we are pushing for the special use. We're not trying to like open the floodgates.
Yep.
I'm honestly penalizing myself because I have one giant tax lot. It's like 11, 12 acres. So, and I'm saying with one restaurant per that 12 acres, there are other places that have multiple parcels that could have more.
That's right.
So also restaurant without alcohol, trying to kind of keep the character of the mill. Also, I haven't found anybody that can break through the 3-foot thick granite walls we have to put a glass wall. If we do, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, the plan isn't to change the exterior of the structure at all.
I think the difficulty is, and I respect what Susan has said, you're looking at standards for a restaurant, yet there are no standards if they do anything else to the mill.
But a guy that's building boats isn't going
There
to
is.
try to change the entire facade.
I would beg to differ, that there are other corporations or companies who will spend resources to change exterior appearances to match their brand. So again, if you're gonna do it for restaurants, then you gotta contemplate developing architectural standards to any renovations to any IND1 property. And I think that's a difficult task without substantial analysis. Primarily you're talking about interior renovations to an existing building. Modify an entry, they could do something else, but again, you know, they could add a Steel Butler building out there tomorrow with a building permit.
I think
It's
you're,
difficult.
you're talking about a separate issue that we've discussed before, and I'm sure will come up again, which is the idea of putting a historic district overlay zone with, in addition to the one we have in West Kingston, to put other historic district overlay zones in various parts of town where those things would be regulated, and would also deal with demolition, like with the Larchmont Inn. So that's a separate question. You really just gotta focus on a simple zoning change of something that was in our ordinance there before, and it didn't have any standards at all, and we're having the standards. My suggestion, rather than spend the whole night on it, is if these people don't care about the outside, then just take out the outside, make it inside only, and then you don't have to go through all these worries about
good idea.
what's gonna happen.
Yep.
Outside, what was the outside entertainment or outside dining? Or?
Outside dining. Yeah, it's not present in the plans, but
It's not present in the plans, but what would be the main concern about that? Because I thought it was the amplified music that was going to be outside.
I mean, I'm personally okay with the outside part. I think it's actually nice, gives it a good vibe. I think with Susan, maybe I'm wrong, but what we're saying is that we have this industrial complex, and we want to, if there is, one of the criteria is to maintain the industrial complex appearance from the outside. We're not necessarily putting design criteria. We're not saying, you know, how many windows you need or anything else. We're just saying maintain the existing industrial complex appearance.
Well, I think that outside dining carries a certain weight in noise production, whether it's music or not. There's laughter, there's, you know, it's not,
Yeah, but I mean, that's,
it's not negligible.
So is the fairgrounds property
good than bad.
industrial one?
Yes.
Okay, so in all candor, my concern is not so much with your site, my concern is with the other sites.
Right.
So when I think about what we're doing with fairgrounds, we've just approved a lot of residential units. And so now we're talking about a zoning change that's going to allow restaurants with outdoor dining. We have to think about the impact on that kind of area and all the other areas. That's my concern. It's not clear to me where are all the neighborhoods that we're impacting if we approve the change.
the one comment I would make in response is that there are so many other uses that are allowed in the industrial 1 district. Like, for example, in the fairground, you could put in a brewery, right, with the residences, because breweries are allowed in the industrial 1 district.
But
And
generally speaking, those still operate on a 9 to 5 basis. I mean, breweries.
Respectfully, I own a brewery. It's much later than that. So
I-
production is 9 to 5, but then the tap room, which is
The
part
tap
of
room.
it's part of the use
So-
for it, stays
I-
open.
there's
I'm
so
not-
many uses in the industrial 1 district that are not industrial and that are allowed. And we just want to add restaurant to that list of possibilities by special use permit. And so I don't think it would change the nature of every industrial 1 district, because the industrial 1 district already allows for a broad array of mixed commercial type uses. It's just that for whatever odd reason, I think it was in response to the state's mandate that said, hey, municipalities do this or they're all permitted by right, that this one beneficial use got left by the wayside. So we think it makes sense, and I don't think it's gonna open the floodgates to change the fabric of every industrial 1 district, because of what's already permitted in that district.
Jamie and Andy, is there a language that could be added that would give the board, when considering the special use permit, enough flexibility that an outdoor dining area could be appropriately designed?
I think
Or is that redundant, or,
Yeah, I mean, I think that power is already there inherent.
okay?
It's inherent and explicit. I mean, probably it's not going to come to you. It's probably just going to go to the zoning board. If
You
it's
don't
just-
think it would come under Unified Development Review?
No, because they don't need planning board relief for this. The scale of it doesn't trigger development plan review, I don't think. And so it would probably just go to the zoning board, but it doesn't matter, even if it came to you under unified development relief. There's a whole section on the general laws under special use permit that talks about all the conditions that a board may impose in connection with a special use permit, including the hours, and there's like 8 different items, and it's a non-inclusive list that zoning boards, and would apply to you if it was unified development either way, have the power to impose as part of a grant of a special use permit. So I think there is enough power there that they could do it if they wanted to. And including presumably even deny it if it was like a very tight space and, there was no way, they could conceivably even deny it.
And as Andy mentioned earlier, there is licensing with the town council, which
Right.
is another layer that
Right.
a lot of municipalities don't have.
And I mean, I do have to say one thing, because it's one of my pet peeves. I'm sorry.
Oh,
No, I just wanted to.
Look, okay, let me just
Finish.
finish. That this is a restaurant without alcohol, and South Kingstown is one of those towns that makes that distinction. We've talked, I think, about do we really need the distinction or not, but we do, and there is a difference. Well, first of all, you've already got the brewery next door, but as far as if you're worried about other places, I think that does inherently imply there's a different degree of the use, whether it's including alcohol or not. You tend to get more of a small neighborhood place, concentrating on the food. And, you talk about the fairgrounds. And to me, I think a lot of those people who are going to be living there would be very happy to have a little restaurant there nearby where they could go. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Boathouse restaurant in Little Compton, which sits in the middle of a very large condominium complex. Doesn't sit in the middle of it, it sits on the edge of it.
Tiverton, right?
It's in Tiverton, yes. I'm sorry, what did I say?
Little Compton.
I said Little Compton, I meant Tiverton, yes, right by the Scotty River Bridge. And so that is a great draw. The people, it's an amenity to the development even, that there's a restaurant there to go to it. And that's a much bigger restaurant with alcohol, etc. So I am, it's your vote, but I'm not worried at all about it.
Well, this 2,500 square foot limitation severely restricts what kind of restaurants will go there.
Yeah.
Is
No,
without,
no major chain would even think about putting up.
and the fact that
Right.
they can't serve alcohol would
Is-
also.
is
Well, even the
alcohol
ones
free
that don't serve
BYOB?
alcohol.
Can you BYOB if you don't serve alcohol? And is that included in this? Is this also BYOB?
Zoning, I believe. It's difficult from a zoning perspective to limit that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that answer.
So that is BY.
So it
It would
is.
include
Yeah.
BYOB.
It could be BYOB, just like any
Madam
place.
Chair, Brian Wagner for the record. I just wanted to point out, as a residual from COVID, outdoor dining is now legislated.
I
You
was gonna
cannot
ask that.
ban it, you can limit it, you can regulate it, but you cannot prohibit it.
I wondered if that was still in place, because at one point it was temporary,
They
and
made it
now it's become
permanent.
permanent, right? Yep.
Learn something every day.
So, Madam Chair, staff did prepare a draft motion. It was worded in a favorable manner. Contains a number of findings, 4 simple findings associated with the review and consistent with Rhode Island law and your comprehensive community plan. As Andy mentioned, as well as the applicant's representative, this is a referral or recommendation to the
Advisory,
town
yes.
council. The town council, once they receive the referral, has to do an order of notice. They're required to do a public hearing where people can come and opine on whether they're for or against or indifferent to it, and then ultimately the town council determines whether they will adopt it as written or with any amendments.
Should there be language either in the findings or in a narrative or something relative to the fact that this was previously allowed by special use permit in our zoning ordinance until we had to go through the entire?
We can make that clear during any
Okay,
presentations
that
from
would
the council.
be helpful.
I'll make that clear.
Okay. Other thoughts, folks, on this?
Just a couple. I know Jamie said it includes a site plan, but the criteria here specifically says parking, so I think E should say parking/site plan to make sure that all areas outside are included in a plan that they give to the town when they do that.
Joe, again, it references Article 7 in the language that they're presenting, and Article 7 includes parking as well as lighting and other site plan issues. So it is there.
It's in
by
there.
referencing Article 7.
And let's get back with what Susan, I think, had some concerns with. I mean, I would be in favor of a criteria that says maintains existing industrial exterior appearance. And personally, I know this is going to be way out of limb, but I'm okay with not necessarily limiting it to without alcohol. They have to get a separate permit anyways. I'd be okay with just a restaurant without limiting it to without alcohol. So
And
that's my input.
does our parking criteria automatically allow them to double dip with mill uses that are more daytime? Like, they don't need their own designated parking for a restaurant? You know, because mills typically
shared
operate,
parking
or
scenario.
industrial typically wraps up by 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Are they allowed to cross? Yeah, like, I'm not sure if what the wording is. Like
That would
sort of
be-
cross park.
That would be part of their plan. They would have to show that they have access to enough parking places.
Okay.
And if they can show that the other businesses will be vacated after a certain period of time, then they could make
Okay.
that presentation. to
And
you
that's
as
baked
part of-
into our parking policy, that's an option?
Well, the regulations require that you have enough parking to serve your
Well,
business. We do have other areas in town that have been approved to have shared parking
Mhm.
arrangements, so.
Well, you're gonna be open during the daytime, right, if you're looking to capture rock spot climbers?
Yeah, I had a plan done for the full mill a couple weeks ago. They identified 213 spaces. Because again, I own the land on Railroad Street, big parking lot there. Big events people do park there and walk around, so there's plenty of parking.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right, for the shared use for sure.
So, Madam Chair, I mentioned there were 4 findings. Perhaps you would like the following added to that. And this would be, these findings are made with the assumption and assertion that the development of the restaurant will not substantially change any historical exterior elements. Again, there are some of the mill properties that a slight enhancement of those historical features would may be viewed as an improvement on some of the other properties.
Are you proposing that as one of the conditions for the special use?
We
or
would
for the-
add that just to the findings that go to the town council.
Oh, to the findings that go to the council, okay.
Which may result in the incorporation of some language.
Yeah, it's just hard because you could imagine an industrial area, and if someone wanted to build a new restaurant, they could, right?
Just to be
So-
clear, I have no problem with that, adding
Yeah.
the language. I'm really proud of how the mills look, I wanna keep
Of
them
course.
looking that way, so.
Anything else from anyone? So we have a draft motion as amended. So Jamie, just to be clear, the language that you proposed will not change any historical exterior elements would be essentially the same idea as what Joe's maintains existing industrial appearance.
Adding that language, in essence, you would be saying to the town council that we were making this positive finding based on our assumption that the historic nature of the property is primarily left intact. The applicant, as they go to the town council, could choose to address that by inserting language as they go through the council process.
Okay. I think the other thing, just in general, as this goes forward to the council, important for them to understand that due to the changes enacted by the General Assembly relative to the special use permit, the number of items in our zoning table that were S's that did not have criteria, and the difficulty in writing all of those things in a very short period of time was, not viable. So
I remember
the 4-hour meeting that we went
the
through these.
meeting at the train depot.
Exactly.
Train depot, yeah.
Exactly. Just so that they understand how and why. So would someone like to make this motion?
I'll make the motion. The South Kingstown Planning Board moves to refer the amendments to the town council and recommend approval of the proposed amendments associated with allowing restaurants without alcohol in the town's industrial zoning districts as submitted by the applicant, Palisades Mill LLC, 174 Kingstown Road, Wakefield, Rhode Island. The approval is based on the following findings of fact and findings of consistency with the town's comprehensive community plan contained within the staff's February 24th, 2026 project review memo, findings of fact 1 through 5, 1 through 4 being as written, and 5 being as discussed by the board and reviewed and stated by administrative officer.
We have a motion from Joe. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Caper. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Sure. Next agenda item, land use, Old Tower Hill Road, form-based code. Jamie.
Thank you. Just as a reminder to everyone, if you look outside, I don't even think it's a reminder that we had almost 3 feet of snow 2 weeks ago. Our workshop on the form-based code was canceled. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. We have another month to prepare. The work session has been rescheduled to April 9th. It's a Thursday evening, and again, it's intended to be one agenda item, form-based code, discussion with our consultant, Able City East. We just met again Monday.
Do we have a time?
I was gonna say about 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
7 to 9.
And it's a standalone meeting.
Standalone meeting, no additional, council items that evening. It's intended to be a true work session with our consultant. We met with our consultant again to go over the slides that they intended to show. We're trying to drill down and refine those, because again, no different whether it's planning board, town council, EDC, our attention spans are limited, so if we can go down to 40 or 50 slides from 60 slides, we're going to try and do that. They did do an analysis of 3 sites on the financial side, and we were discussing on Monday to potentially go in depth on one site. We may primarily go in depth. We're discussing right now to go in depth on the financial analysis for the Berkshire Bank site, since Berkshire moved due to their acquisition by Beacon Bank, and that is a property that, if the form-based code was adopted, potentially may be ripe for redevelopment versus just putting a coffee shop in there and utilizing the existing drive-through, and it may offer an opportunity to someone. And Sean Bourgeois from Dedalius Group will explain that financial analysis. And again, our thoughts are, is if we drill down on one financial analysis, it is really the same as the others. So if you start with a building that's 4,000 square feet and I can expand it to 12,000 square feet because I can add 2 more stories and add more uses and accommodate the parking, your return is potentially threefold. If you can quadruple it somewhere else, your return is fourfold. So the analysis, I think, is transferable. They will be prepared to go through all 3 sites if that's what the council wants. We are working through the architecture, the redevelopment of some of these sites, and I will share with you, if you bear with me for a moment. Actually, Brian's on, so Brian has to go off.
Oh my God. They're strong.
And what I did is I have a couple examples here, and what's unique is they're actually not sites that we're using for our presentation, but we were experimenting with how we would do this. So primarily you're selecting a site, and with this there's a site plan associated with it. But with the ability to do architectural renderings, is we simply envision a sketch of what types of buildings and form and shapes could fit on this site. We start to refine the sketch, we continue to refine the sketch, we add more architectural detail to the sketch, we continue to refine, we actually can create a model for that sketch, and then we can bring that sketch to life. So we go from the post office.
I used to grocery shop there.
To something that could look like this, and we're working through the analysis on our sites. So it's taking the buildings that used to be in the back, moving them up to the street, incorporating that personal pedestrian type feel, even though you're on a busy arterial. But if you soften it with landscaping and building typology and architecture, it changes the dynamics of the street, even though it's a busy street. And I have a couple examples of it.
Can you just go back for
Yeah,
a minute to the,
sure.
so the
There's flowers in
before,
the
is
travel
that
lane.
supposed to be
Bottom right-hand
specifically
corner.
the post office or any place?
That is the post office.
Right.
So if you were to redevelop, and what I'm looking for input from you is anybody offended or would like things to be shown slightly differently? And I have a couple examples. So again, that's what could be built in a build to. Remember, the form-based code has a build to line. It requires, when you're redeveloping the property, not a renovation, but redeveloping the property, that you can't build the building in the back anymore. You have to pull the buildings up front. You have to incorporate architectural features that are articulated in these photos.
How come the power lines look so high compared to the buildings?
Again, it's photoshopping and just it's
I mean, the
not a
buildings look
perfect
little and
world, Robin. I can actually have AI go in and remove them for you, but then it's faux too.
Right, in an ideal world, underground utilities, but.
In a perfect world, Maria, it is. So if you just bear with me, I have a couple.
Jamie, do
Yeah.
we care at this point what the function of those buildings are? Are they banks? Are they schools? Are they little
No.
post office?
That's what
We don't-
form-based code
we
is
don't
all
care
about.
at all.
We don't care. Form-based code really
Doesn't care.
it gets rid of the discussion of what's on the first floor, whether it's a bank, a coffee shop, a restaurant, a service. That first floor could be the building on the right could be a post office
Okay.
with offices on the second floor and something else. So you could hide a loading dock in the back. You're really more concerned about the form, and you've already pre-approved the uses. You've already said the uses are appropriate so long as you follow the form.
So I have a question. So this shows a really cute dooryard with benches and the sidewalk and like a wagon or whatever. in some of our new form-based code, we've got the building hugging the sidewalk,
We're
which would
work- so
eliminate all of that.
We're
So-
work, I'm gonna show you if you want.
And then also, this is, it looks like 2.5 stories,
Yes.
where we are talking about allowing it to be at least,
Okay.
okay.
What, one
this looks-
site won't represent everything.
Like, this looks
Right.
really.
This is good feedback. This is why I'm showing you.
And also because you use that specific example, the post office, it doesn't demonstrate the haphazard, overly in-your-face signage that we see in some of the other areas for a before image.
Correct.
But this is, I think, for me, maybe a little deceptive because it shows these cute little colonial buildings that are only 2.5 stories with lots of flowers and flagpoles, but that's not actually what we're permitting. So that's, I mean, our fantasy world, it looks like this,
Add
but
stories to those buildings.
I don't think they're as small as you might think.
No, those are big buildings.
But
Decent.
If you don't look at the power lines.
because,
Right.
but they're also not hugging on the
Just
street.
for you, Robin, I'm gonna have my AI overlord
That-
remove those power lines.
But they're not hugging the street like what we
So
think we're.
I'll give you a different example. So we mentioned we're looking at code testing Berkshire Bank. So let me switch over modes here. So again, this is kind of how our format is. We're code testing 121 Old Tower Hill Road. This is the location of it. This is the Berkshire Bank site. This is what that site looks like. Here is the site as it's laid out today. It actually has a significant amount of parking.
Dual access.
Here's what a traditional, so what's interesting, if you look at this building and parking lot layout is not code compliant to our existing zoning code. The next slide shows you a code compliant building. So if someone tore that down and went to redevelop this site, this is what they can do. They actually lose a substantial amount of parking. And that's where their building can be located. Because it's a triangular shaped lot, it's unique. If we apply the form-based code, this is one of the scenarios that Susan says, the building has a build to line, the frontage is shrunk, and that public-private realm between street frontage and building changes. You put the parking behind, you're trying to build streetscape. So we go back to what the site looks like. Just bear with me because I was working on
That
this
poor
today.
tree.
We reorientated the site. Here's a schematic of the type of building that can go here. We refined the sketch. We then overlay it. Here's a more simplistic 2.5 story building. Here's that color rendered. Here's a model of that. Here's another model. If we dive deeper, here's a different building. This is a 3-story flat roof with a heavy cornice at the top. We then bring a little more refinement to that. I dropped the story off of that but kept some of the bulk. I brought it closer to the road, changed the architecture for it. And then this is just a variation of that architecture. So we're trying to be representative of the types and styles of buildings that can be built here, but also you're going for a certain look. And I will tell you, our department created these, which are very different than, I actually deleted the original one from Maple City East.
So back to some of these do represent more of a, like, right, that
Okay,
one.
stop.
That shows more of a setback
Yeah.
that would allow for that pedestrian area and some
It's
landscaping.
only a 10-foot setback from the sidewalk.
But don't we actually prohibit, like, doesn't our thing
10 feet
actually
from the
demand that it be closer?
We're balanced, remember in our 10 things we want to do for the existing July code, we're evaluating that exact street profile of what you want it to look. Do you want it to look like that or more like this? This building's a little more closer to the road than the other one that I just showed you. So we're working through all this. We need your feedback, right?
Having that greater setback does seem to really enhance
But it's,
the site.
yes, but it depends on what they do with their setback. And if it wasn't a cute landscape job and it was just kind of ratty looking out there, it wouldn't look, you know, like,
Dead,
we
yeah.
can't demand the landscape standards to make it always look like this with its little window boxes and its cute little awnings. Like, we can't demand that. So it might just be set back and be surrounded by
You
ugliness.
can have overall criteria that would lead to that, correct?
But yes, I mean, my concern is you're taking away from the parking that you're moving it back. You're taking away, you're creating dead space here. It may
Remember,
be
we're trying to,
right. You want people to be comfortable walking on the sidewalk.
so it's a balance. We're trying to fit that building in those rough dimensions, 60 by 135, and also accommodate 35 parking spaces. So if I push the building back, I go from 60 feet wide to 55 or 50. That.
I think we're talking about the other way, about pushing the building forward.
Yeah,
making
no,
sure-
and that's the
it's forward
three-story
there.
flat roof. So again, we're working through these semantics architecturally to see what you feel as a community is more appropriate. And again, you may have a different standard for Old Tower Hill than you do for Main Street, than you do for Kingston Road. I did one, if I can pull it up real quick. Sorry, I have Alana.
When we say form-based, what do we mean by the word form?
The shape, the mass, the bulk, the scale, and then, and Liz can probably articulate this better than I, which also is not just the outer portion, but the way, the relationships between doors and windows
and the
yeah.
parking and the other buildings.
Which we currently have
I mean,
zero.
form's a simple little word. That sounds like an awful lot to put under one umbrella.
That's what it means though.
If you asked me what form-based code was, I couldn't tell you.
So you're predetermining the built box, right? You're saying I'm okay.
So what Maria then started with, size and mass, or mass
You're
alone.
predetermined. What you're saying is, I'll go back to it. You're saying that if you just made, and I could have AI just show that as a shoebox, and maybe I'll do that. That if that was a shoebox, you are determining that the placement of that box, that shape on a lot is appropriate, and you're more concerned about the placement and the fenestration associated with the building, and less concerned whether it's a hair salon or a restaurant or a lawyer's office
yeah.
or a doctor's office in the building, because you're
Understood.
getting the shapes you want.
So you used a word fenestration, it sounded like.
Fenestration.
Windows. The windows.
Oh, fenêtre. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Fancy word for the architectural detail associated with the windows and trim.
So what do we have in our standards to ensure that whether it's 5 feet of street frontage or 10 feet or 15, that it look cute?
If someone's gonna spend $10 million on a building, you're gonna hope they're gonna mow the lawn.
Well, I mean, I hope a lot of things, but
Versus Dollar General.
planning board makes me cynical, so what do we
Well,
have it?
Dollar General is a prime example. Dollar General has a beautiful building. They
The grass
were
is this deep.
required to do landscaping. I actually called them and asked them a year ago whether they were observing no mow May.
In November.
Within 1 week, the lawn was mowed. But, they have foundation plantings, they have other landscaping on the property, and it hasn't been mulched since they
Yeah.
installed the initial mulch. with
It's
the
mulched
building.
with cigarette butts.
So,
Nice.
but you look at Berkshire Bank is maintained pristinely, other properties are maintained pristinely. We can't codify pride of keeping your property well kept, right? That's an individual, that's a corporate decision. We can't codify
Yeah,
that.
the only kind of maintenance we can is things like stormwater.
So you would hope the investment that's made continues to be looked after by the owners.
So I think coming back full circle, one of the benefits of bringing it to the street is we avoid poorly kept landscapes.
And it's all, also, of course, makes it more commercially viable for a property owner.
More
If it's,
parking.
There's more
if it's more
parking,
attractive
the
and it's the safe entrance that is inviting and so on.
Does
All
our,
right, thanks for the help. That form is a wimpy little word.
do our standards allow either right up to the street or that nice 15-foot dooryard? Like what exactly are we, what's our setback restriction in what we have right now?
I think we're at 10 to 15 feet for that private-public space between the sidewalk and the building. We were originally at 5 and 7.
Yeah.
And as we looked at the kind of two-lane traffic on Old Tower Hill Road and the volumes, the planning board in one of our meetings with Jason and Pam said, you know, we may need to push them back. So you'd be looking more like a build-to line at Chipotle's, where there's that opportunity of sidewalk. If it's a restaurant, a little outdoor dining space or landscaping, then building. And maybe if there was an outdoor dining, you would allow that building to bring a porch forward into that kind of private-public realm.
So that version that you just showed us that was close to the sidewalk really is actually closer here than now in our in our
Yes.
regulations. Okay.
And you will be sure to explain the definition of fenestration at,
Yeah, well, and it's tough because we work in this world and sometimes we say,
Fancy words.
Yeah, $10 words.
that we think, so just give you another view. This is Twisted Pizza and the True Value site. Our Maple City East gave us this building. I went to, so I worked through that. And
Oh,
this
so
is
much
the
better.
building I
So
came up
much
with. So I think this is a little more South Kingstown-like and less urban or Main Street appropriate. You know, again, we're working through different variations of this.
You mean it's-
And potentially I can add I'll add a third floor to this, flat roof it. And just adding a third floor and flat roofing it without changing anything, it looks like it's gonna be closer to the street, just because of its scale, even though you didn't change anything. Yeah. So I think you're more comfortable with architecture like this versus this. correct?
yes.
I did one other.
Even the detail on the shingles, Jamie. Good work.
I'm looking at the flowers.
My
All the
software works hard.
These are like poison. They're so strong. They're not good.
Cinnamon ones are better.
Yeah, this is peppermint.
And Jamie, so there'll be enough time in this meeting to show not only these before and after,
We're gonna pick up,
renderings.
so again, we're going through how much time do we have?
Could I add to that when I was looking at these, I realized there's no definition to the different zones. You know, so neighborhood center versus neighborhood core. To me, those sound awfully similar.
There's a table somewhere
I couldn't find one in here.
in some of the original.
Yeah.
They are all right. They are defined
Um,
because
you
they're
know,
too similar sounding.
This was the Bank of America site, and again, we've already done renderings for this, we're not gonna bring this, I may have some poster boards with stuff like this, but, you know, this is the potential of the redo of Bank of America.
So is that building on the right the corner?
Yes, it'd be the corner.
Because what we've been looking at all along is this little park with gazebos on the corner.
Correct, but again, there are different ways to anchor buildings. You take that park, which is on the corner, you move it interior, and you celebrate the architecture of the building as your corner. Again, this is flipping that image.
Wait,
What-
explain
what are we looking
where
at?
the corner is.
Now.
So just off that tree line, and again, we're limited sometimes with our sketchability, so Old Tower Hill Road would be just off to the right. So just in the bottom right of the screen would
So
be
all those
the
trees are
four-way
not there?
intersection. Yeah.
Okay.
So we push that back a little bit.
Okay.
And again, there are different setbacks that I've been playing with there, but that's more of a street view. So if you were standing across the street at CVS or Ocean State Job Lot, you would be looking at buildings like that. That also could be transplantable to the Ocean State Job Lot site.
Are you going to be
Yes, I was gonna
presenting-
ask about the Holly Street renderings.
Are you going to be presenting the parking garage? Because for people like myself, I feel like I'll never come to town again because I won't be able to park.
So
I'm not a walkable,
Yeah.
you know.
Again, the parking garage that was shown was associated with a full redevelopment of the Wakefield Mall. And, that is gonna take a substantial investment by someone someday. And you would probably, in all likelihood, need a significant downturn in the economy or a high vacancy rate in the mall for someone to anticipate a tear down rebuild. If the mall lost their grocery store tenant, if the mall lost their home supply tenant, and then slowly whittled away at some of the interior mall entities, and you have all this square footage and you're only getting 25% of the rent you normally used to get, someone will potentially look to redevelop that mall. But in all likelihood,
And you wouldn't have a grocery store anymore?
I can't, no one in this room can control whether or not
Grocery
you will
store.
have the number of grocery stores you
Right,
have.
but I think the town council would appreciate seeing that part of the plan because they might be feeling the same way as how am I going to come to town? Where am I going to be? Unless I live in one of those apartments, you know?
How do you come to town, or?
How do you park when you get to town?
Yeah, how do I use town anymore if I have to park somewhere?
All of these would be fully parked. The Berkshire Bank is the prime example. You're just putting the parking behind and pulling the buildings forward.
Okay, because your economic development guy was talking about a parking complex and that he acknowledged there wouldn't be enough parking.
Unless you build a garage.
Right.
The economic development person was speaking as an individual, not as someone who's analyzed the parking needs in the corridor. We have a consulting team looking at that.
They talked about a parking
in-
garage too.
Yep.
In each of the various scenarios, will you be, I think one of your images had a breakdown, commercial, residential, but also demonstrating that that's not necessarily how it would evolve. It could be, X amount of percentage of residential versus commercial versus, just to demonstrate that there's that inherent flexibility.
Yes.
So that someone looking at it won't say, well, he only showed,
No, and again, we're working through and code testing it and bouncing ideas on how, everything gets presented.
Jim, what's gonna be the incentive to an existing property owner who's satisfied with his income to go along and do some of these changes?
So I think, I've dealt with this in other communities where we have form-based codes, and I think the incentive to an existing owner who has no debt is a difficult discussion. Because if they have no debt and they have a revenue stream, there's really no incentive for them to change that financial structure. It's the next generation of that family or the next owner. Or, as I mentioned, sometimes good results come from less favorable events. A downturn in the economy and then a re-swing in the economy. So, we'll take something like Ocean State Job Lot property, right? Ocean State Job Lot's there, they probably have a 10-year lease with 2 5s, locked up for 20 years. That property's not gonna get redeveloped until maybe Ocean State Job Lot decides to change their structure or close some stores. And in a tight financial economy, they'll say South Kingstown has one of the less performing stores, they decide to close it. Now you got an owner of a commercial facility that doesn't have that revenue stream that you suggested. So that's when potentially they look of filling that revenue stream. How do you do it? I have an opportunity to potentially triple my density with the form-based code versus just replicating what I have, which I lost to the economy. So some of it is if you have retail and you can combine the residential in some instances can carry your commercial. It gives a developer more stability in ups and downs in the economy, because even in ups and downs in the economy, people still need to live somewhere. Yeah.
I would also say don't look for quick fixes.
Yeah.
This is the long term. You got to start
Long
somewhere. It's like, when you start in the subdivisions and you put the sidewalk, you make them put a sidewalk in the street, and there's a sidewalk that's just all by itself, not connected to anything. But over time, as everything builds out, you're going to have a sidewalk all the way through. And I think that's the same thing. You just have to take a long view of this.
I think that's important, that's how it's presented, that this is
Right.
not.
No,
Today, here's the
some of this
plan.
stuff will stay this way for
Tomorrow,
20
we're gonna
years.
see
Right.
the entire project done.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, Andy makes an interesting point, is that if
It'll be too late. If you wait until that time comes, then it will be too late to do it.
Right.
You put it in now, and over time, it will happen. I mean, I've seen that in a lot of places, and, plans that I never thought, would come to fruition. And, little by little, over time, they've pretty much worked out.
Newport, across from La Forge. That parking lot's going, and they're
Oh, yeah, they're gonna put up a whole development there, yeah, on the front along there.
so again, you
I
look
mean, and
at-
that's come full circle, because originally it was a mansion.
right.
if you look at a code like this, and you said we could go back to when this corridor started developing, and we could change the dynamics and the nature it developed in, and you had farm fields, you're basically going, you're trying to envision that, look, in most redevelopment areas, no one has vacant land in New England in a main street strip commercial corridor where they can go and just recreate it. So it's incremental in its very nature, but it takes time. But if you said, hey, if we could go back to 1960 when there was one farmhouse on the corner of Kingston Road and Old Tower Hill Road, how would you want it developed? Would you want it developed the way it is today, or would you have wanted to incorporate some of these things? Because if you had, you may not be changing the code today. And I'm sure you'd be tweaking it, or something would evolve, or someone said, you limited me to 2.5 stories and I really need to go to 3 to 4 now to make the finances work. You'd have all those discussions. But this is an incremental approach at a new way to develop property.
Go ahead.
So I have a question, which, if this is the presentation you're doing at the town council, it might come up. We just had a property on Old Tower Hill Road sort of reinvent itself on Tower Hill Road. Would they have, I assume they wouldn't have been permitted to do what they did if this was in place. But would they have been better off if this was in place with what, so you had conversations with that developer when that
Yeah.
property changed. Would they have wanted to be able to go up a couple stories or move things around, or would this have actually been a monkey wrench to what they wanted to do?
The property you're talking about, we did have discussions with the property owner after we acquired it. I don't want to say he was in favor of the form-based code, but the form-based code did not scare him. It was something he would look as an alternative and option to increase revenue stream. To Armin's point, if you have we'll take that building and you add 10 apartments to it. 10 apartments at $2,500 to $3,000 a piece is $25,000 to $30,000 a month. You kind of pay off your note, and then that's revenue stream. And if you're struggling downstairs, you may not be struggling on the second and third floor. The difficulty on that property was parking everything. You know, how do you get that density and that mix of uses over the length of time of those uses, they overlap, and fully park it? You know, Old Tower Hill Road is different than Main Street and Wakefield, because on Main Street, you have all that on-street parking. So you can reduce the parking standards by 50%. We're gonna have to be careful about the parking requirements with the form-based code, because we don't have on-street parking.
So he could have done this anyway.
No, he could not. He could not add.
Because of the
second
parking.
floor. Couldn't have added a second floor residential or third floor residential, not allowed.
But he could now, if we pass this.
If you pass this, he could have.
But he still
yes.
couldn't have parked it, maybe.
The difficulty would be parking it.
Can you go back to the image that you were just at?
This one,
It was a, like a pen and ink kind of.
these,
Yes, that one. The light fixture looks too small.
again, I'll talk to
Just-
my AI overlord.
Just saying.
You have to understand, some of the new modern AI software, if I tell it to increase the light pole,
It's all fake.
it decides to make the trees smaller. So it's constantly a balancing act in every redraw. And every redraw takes 60 to 90. Now what's amazing is from this to a model, something that would take an architectural firm a week to do is done in a matter of 4 to 5 minutes.
AI.
And then you could presumably send it if you had a 3D printer
Yeah.
and print your model.
That's right.
Print your model.
Yeah.
That's what we need is, 3D model.
Going to a budget hearing, I'll ask for
Add
it
that to the
again.
capital budget.
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
So everyone's, we'll say, relatively comfortable with the architecture we're showing? You know, show the variation in the forms.
Would all of that fenestration be unreasonable to expect? You know, that cute detail on the windows and
Maybe
stuff?
not the arched
columns?
windows.
Probably,
Like, is that reasonable to expect somebody who's trying to turn a buck to do all of that fancy stuff?
you know, and all of it depends, it's a numbers game, it's an Excel spreadsheet, but if you have an apartment that's renting for X, and you want to get them to move into your new development, some developers will differentiate themselves from the marketplace by doing something nicer. Others will do something potentially not as nice and just undercut their neighbor versus doing something nicer and add. Again, you know, these are perfect world scenarios, so that, you know, and you know, this is a different variation of this. This has much less architectural detail. It's still a nice building, but it doesn't have that, you know, and someone may say and even Brian and I talked about it, we probably won't go into this level of detail, because the you know, when you start to add colors, someone may say, I don't like that candy stripe awning. So we may stay to pen and ink and rough shapes and forms, because, you know, someone can't say, I don't like the
Windows.
blue building, I don't like the red awnings. This
I
just
thought the other looks so much better.
okay. Okay, all right. Again, we may have them on poster boards and we may have them around the room, but again, we're trying to show the forms and the shapes of buildings, and that's what we're trying to show. And the fact we can move them up to the street and put parking behind.
And once you get the first one up, others will follow. because-
Exactly. That's what we've been saying all along. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen form-based, but I've been in a lot of cities where they weren't redeveloping, they were developing over the last
I'm gonna have to go next
15
door.
years.
Okay.
And it's amazing how it spreads once the first building goes up.
If you're going next door, shall we just wrap this up and see, Brian can inform us on any staff updates, yes?
We'll switch over. Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night,
Jamie.
Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
You know, as we've all said throughout this process, there's a huge educational component here, and it's going to be really important that that is made very clear at this next meeting. I mean, just tonight, fenestration, setbacks, form, incentives. You know, may not be well understood just looking at some before and after photos. So, yeah.
You're right, and it's gonna be a burden to explain things, I mean, because people are set in thinking about setbacks, which is one of the attributes you're actually trying to do away with by focusing on building forms. That's why we have this build to range, to bring things up, but to allow some interplay between facade depths and various uses for that area in front of it, whether you're landscaping it and just making it pretty to look at for people coming into the building, or whether you're activating the space for dining or, you know, other outdoor business extensions.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to add?
My
Yes.
concern is that we present too much. I think that would be overwhelming. Jamie started by saying he was just gonna focus on several examples. But then at the end, he started showing so many different things and so many different renderings that would be my caution, is lay out the parameters and then just say, for example, this one, for example, this one, and for example, this one.
I think another thought is that we're just focusing on Dale Carlisle Corner instead of, you know, there's a lot of zones that aren't being addressed at all in this presentation.
Well, they were in the charrette. There was the Holly Street one, there was the Wakefield Mall, there were quite a few.
Berkshire Bank's on there.
Yep, yep. But again, it will be up to staff and the consultant to figure out a way to not overwhelm them.
Okay,
Present
what's
the
the-
information they need.
What's the
but-
difference between a neighborhood center and a neighborhood core?
Those are just terms they used for, are you talking about the different districts?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were just terms that they came up with.
We can come up with new.
We used to
Well,
call-
if they have different names, they must have differences, right?
They
So
do.
that's
They
what I'm.
do. They have
saying.
different,
It's a transition from total commercial to total residential.
Right, but so what's the difference between core and center?
Sounds like it
Core
should
is
be the same.
primary one, or
Sounds like it
center,
should be the same.
and
That's
they
all
gotta
right, Jamie's
decide
back.
which is
Jamie.
the
They throw you
definition.
back out?
Difference between neighborhood center and neighborhood core, is there a difference?
Neighborhood center and neighborhood core.
And so in that context, we're talking about having more, either better description or user-friendly language or something that. As, you know, more understandable.
well, what the conversation started was, when we're doing a presentation, it has to be simple enough to come across effectively, and that the whole presentation runs the risk of being overwhelming.
Right, too much information.
Yeah.
I have one other question too. We've always talked a lot about the Wakefield Mall and the Shaws, and the Shaws is set back so far, and it's a sea of parking, and we had those beautiful renderings where there was like, you know, this gateway entrance into the area. But then, what I heard you say tonight, Jamie, is that we're not going to focus on the Wakefield Mall right now. So I think that's so important, that area.
They're gonna discuss the transects and the zones and the development potential, but they're gonna be prepared to talk about a lot of things, but we have to focus on certain aspects of it. So just going back, we'll go through the districts. You have the kind of peripheral residential zones, which is the residential neighborhood. That's the one, right? The next one is the brown, which is the neighborhood center, okay? We're changing that. The stuff on Main Street is going to a 1.5 because we want to kind of slightly modify that area to adhere to the vernacular of the existing residential character and architecture. So we're changing that around. The purple or the lavender area is the neighborhood core. That's kind of that traditional strip commercial that I just showed you the renderings for, where we're trying to push the parking to the rear of the property, bring the buildings forward, and create this public-private, pedestrian-friendly, attractive corridor. And based on the forms and the placement of buildings and the requirements of landscaping and the architectural detail you need to put on the buildings. And it goes from not so dense, a little more dense, and most dense. The most dense is the purple. That was formerly called the gateway area, and we went through some different names and categories that we can call it, but that's the most dense. That's the Wakefield Mall and the Mazda dealership. That's where, if you were gonna allow the 4-story buildings, the denser properties, that's potentially, to Robin's point, if you really went dense there, you're gonna have to deal with parking. That could result in a parking garage that's at a central core and that things are built around it, so when you drive by, you don't see a parking garage. You see buildings and that parking garage is hidden internal to the development. And there's a couple of projects. There's one by the University of Connecticut that was just built as an apartment complex. The parking garage on 3 sides is ringed by residential buildings. So when you drive by, you see residential style apartment complexes. They're big in scale, but you don't see this very voluminous parking garage that you would see if you went to the West Farms Mall or a large mall.
They would be residential use only?
It could be residential, it could be office, it's a mix. The code primarily requires you to do non-residential on the first floor.
Yeah,
And then
okay, but it's not parking for me.
What?
But it wouldn't be parking
Yes,
for me.
so any non-residential use has to accommodate parking for its visitors.
Okay.
So if, we'll call it in the redevelopment of the Wakefield Mall, they added a drugstore. It doesn't mean that only the residents who live in that new redevelopment on the second floor, they
Yeah.
have to park it.
Use that drugstore.
And they're only gonna be successful if they can draw more than 30,000 residents in the community to their site to eat, dine, entertain services, buy clothing, buy groceries. West Hartford, Connecticut was very successful in building a Whole Foods. The Whole Foods has a parking structure underneath it. It has a conveyor system for carriages from the bottom floor to the retail space, and then they have a surface parking lot. But the surface parking lot is half the size of a traditional Whole Foods because half of it is underneath the store. So you can reduce the footprint of retail when you have the topography or the ability to put something underneath. I mean, if you look at right now, if you could have put all the parking for the Wakefield Mall that's in front of it, under it, you would increase the green space or the usable area by 50% of what's there. And with modern structures and conveyor systems, you literally go to an escalator, you push your carriage goes up with you as you go up the escalator. And at the top, your carriage is waiting for you.
When you show this image or an image of the various zones, how can you demonstrate the flexibility that should be allowed within the zones?
A lot of it is the detail of the code, and you could spend hours going through this detail, and that's something we have to kind of wait for feedback of someone saying, I looked at the code, you know, we're making an assumption that in preparation of the work session, that people have flipped through, read, or studied the code. Because the intent of the session isn't to spoon feed page, you know, start on page 1, go to page 2, go, it over, you know, it's almost a 200-page code. We'd be here, it'd be a week-long workshop.
The images are not terribly
It hasn't been answered.
And
user-friendly. Let me
again,
look
that-
at the second image.
Do we need a different
That's some of the difficulty we're talking about, is that how do we get to, or be able to understand the potential question of an example? And to Maria's point, the second, you know, I can get out of this
But even
and
just-
blow it up, but, you know, you may need to have something at this scale so everybody understands that there's a street line, a sidewalk, and a build to line, and things happen between that. Because if you're just, you know, looking at the slide, that slide doesn't tell, it tells me there's elements of the code that deal with this, but it's not, we're not diving that deep to the specific. We would end up spending 2 hours on this one slide.
People's
So-
eyes are gonna roll back in their heads if you show this slide.
Right, so you need a bird's eye view with maybe a red box, a blue box, a yellow box.
And some flowers.
And then move them around a little bit. Keep it simple.
Yes, lots of window boxes.
No.
So I think, I feel like Robin's question was about the words themselves, the core and the center,
Yeah.
which are synonyms. And so to a person who doesn't know this the way you know it, well, that's the core and that's the center. Well, that's the same, those words pretty much mean the same thing.
So I'll go back to just one simple, in most form-based codes, they don't worry about, we'll call them the cute names. It's Transect 1, Transect 2, Transect
But you have to
3,
sell this
Transect
to
4.
our residents and our town council, so it needs a cute name. Like you're selling this to our,
Transect zone,
like
way
seriously.
too bureaucratic, geeky sounding.
Yes, but also core and center is like the same thing. So there has to be some delineation for the people in town, the businesses, and the town council to understand the bigger picture.
To know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just saying.
So core and center are too similar.
And that's a very brave person on that bicycle.
Yeah.
An e-bike?
With no helmet.
No, it was a very brave person.
And traffic's very light that day.
And I hope after this winter, the DOT comes and fixes all of those metal grates are smashed by plows and all the plants are dead.
You may see modifications to those over time.
In fact, this one's broken right in our picture.
That's right, it's very.
Like the
realistic.
other kind of tree grates that you see in areas where they're just flat.
Flush.
Yeah, more effective, actually.
Again, this was an experiment in new technology.
Mm.
Potholes, look at that.
I
I know.
was gonna say.
Yeah, no, the green
Potholes are
infrastructure
nothing
component
Compared to what they are now.
important.
So again, the feedback you've given us is good. It'll help us refine things, because the last thing we wanna do is everybody's like, great presentation, couldn't read the slide, great presentation, didn't understand what they were talking about. You
Or
know.
you're talking, they're like milk, butter, eggs, and making their shopping list and not paying attention because it's.
We
it's
equate it
too
to
much.
Charlie Brown's kindergarten teacher.
Wah, wah,
Wah,
wah.
wah, wah.
There was an image that was used in one of the earlier presentations, just a photo from Old Tower Hill Road looking west that just showed, the utility lines, the signage, everything
Yeah.
that's an important image to use.
But I think if you want to get their attention, show people how it could be much worse based with what we have right now for rules. An 8-bay gas station going in at Dale Carlia, that's a wake-up call. And that's one of the reasons I jumped on board with this, was because I could just imagine, a Seasons or a Cumberland Farms operating a gigantic gas station on that corner. That's scary to me. And I think based on our codes right now, how bad could it be if we don't step in? And I think that might be a selling feature
I'm
too.
looking for my purple car wash.
Yeah, I
Oh,
knew
car
what you were
wash.
looking for, Jamie.
I'm looking for, yeah. Again, I do have a layout for a larger convenience store, gas station on a particular property in town that I think people
You will get some attention with that.
would be aesthetically upset with it. They may be happy there's that type of facility in town, but I think people overall may ask how and why did that happen? I thought we were adopting regulations to modify that ability for someone to do that.
Well, you could also show them the big storage unit and what could have
It's
been.
so universally
what could,
beloved.
What could have been if you know,
Yeah.
if this had been in place 10 years ago.
That's true.
A lot of this, so we have to remember, a lot of what you're talking about, we did it already. We did it at the charrette. They created a 200-page report.
No, it's too much. 200
Yeah.
pages is too much.
But you've looked at it, you've read it,
Too much.
and that's why we can't throw too much at them in 2 hours. We're trying to keep it to 30 to 40 minutes on the presentation side, to then have a discussion of 30 or 40 minutes, which may lead 20 or so minutes for other people to speak, members, boards, commissions, and or the public.
And we were more immersed in the whole process. Multiple meetings, multiple days of the charrette even.
Yeah.
So,
And it may be important for, the presentation happens, and if Maria has an opportunity to go to the podium, she can stand there and say, I'm sure a lot of you glazed over a little bit tonight. We've been working at this for 2 years. We understand this perhaps a little more in depth than you have, because it was a 2-hour presentation, and we're working on refining and solidifying what will be in the code to have a final draft available to the council.
okay. Anything else from anyone? We will not have another meeting before this presentation.
Well, I have one observation. Jamie, when you started your presentation to us, you emphasized that that this code is what enables development to become. It's not mandating that this happen immediately. But what happens as the presentation rolls forward is we keep focusing on what you could do and what it could become. And so what happens to the ear of the listener is they start assuming that this is going to be what it's going to look like. And I think it's important that you remind people that it's not going to mandate that you make these changes automatically. It's just that as opportunities arise, if you want to change the development, this is the kind of look that we would be encouraging. So, because what happens is all the pictures and all the details, they're so concrete, people are going to start thinking, I'm going to lose my parking in Shaw's. And when you started your presentation, you made it crystal clear that that wasn't going to happen right away. That this is just
I'll be dead and gone.
But I think what's going to happen is people are they're going to get sucked into the visuals, and they're going to lose sight of that. So I think it's how you have to kind of watch the audience and see where they're going.
Right, and that's why we may, and Brian and I have talked about it, and Tracy's been involved in the conversations of, instead of showing them 5 different renderings of the building, we may talk about, if you look at this sketch here, that I may just show 4 different sketches on one page. That this, and again, we'll put it on the TVs and see how it looks and at what the scale is, that we're not doing 4 slides, we're just showing you 4 different types of buildings. I showed you 4 different, but instead of doing, these 4 types of buildings and the different styles and everything, we may just show them 1, 2, 3, 4 on one slide.
Or show them a picture of Berkshire Bank and then say, if that's were redeveloped with this way, it could look like this.
Yes.
Done.
Or it
And
could
that's
like,
that's
I
2
mean,
seconds.
Yeah,
literally
that's
2, 3
quick.
seconds,
It's
and
very
we're on to
pretty.
the next slide.
Yeah.
and there is value in showing the gas station or whatever you choose to show, that if we don't change something, you could have this. I think you need that element.
Yeah.
And you could even say that now. Here's Berkshire Bank. If we don't do anything, you're going to have this, which is actually what we have. And then say,
Okay. Are we set with this?
Yep.
Everybody? Okay, so again, we have a regular meeting between now and the special meeting, but our work session would be the following Tuesday from the special meeting, so we won't have an opportunity to discuss this again, so.
So
Any-
you still are gonna have the regular work session on the 14th of April afterwards?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
My only concern about this is it's kind of like, perfection's the enemy of good. We're shooting for this, kind of shooting for the moon as far as what we'd like to see. And that's kind of good because it's our neighborhood, center. But I'm not sure it's realistically financially anymore. We live in a different world than we lived in 10, 15, 20 years ago. Some of those renderings you're showing could easily be $600, $700, $800 a square foot or more. You took $1,000 square foot apartment, you're gonna have to charge $5,000, $6,000 a month to break even, and I just don't see that. So I think maybe showing some of those more modest buildings is probably something more realistic. I'd hate to be in a situation where again the enemy's the perfection's the enemy of the good, and we designed this to a point that we get nothing. Like I said, I see it all the time with my rentals. We're in a totally different world than 20 years ago. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, people in their 30s with kids moving into their parents' basement because they can't afford an apartment anywhere. And, my last 4 tenants all moved in with their relatives. They weren't moving anywhere else. They just couldn't make it.
But from my perspective, I'm constantly reminded that you don't want it to look like places that are more north of here and
Yeah.
more urban.
It will.
But there was your more modest ones.
Yeah.
I think are maybe realistic, but some of those others, nice to dream, but I just don't see them. We already talked about financial. When is it worth? People already have the investment in the property and the building. They got to overcome that, and then to build at $800 a square foot to rent something out. I just don't know how realistic it is these days. I don't see that going away either. Just how much it costs to build.
We can always hope that, in the next couple of years, 2.5 years, things turn around a little bit.
Well, and what the commercial atmosphere is will be very different. I had a insurance young man come to my house.
But we
and
got to.
He says, how do you get your food delivered? 'Cause I have a single lane driveway. I was like, food delivery?
Yeah, we got Belmont.
We can hope that things turn around. I grant it. But one of the big things that got us into the situation we are now is regulation. I know somebody that's trying to build a house right now, and you got to go with the R30 foam insulation. 1,800 square foot, you got an estimate of over $40,000 just to insulate it. That is regulation. That's just to build, just to insulate it, nothing else. So yeah, we can hope things turn around in 2.5 years, but better than hope is the regulations are driving this. So we got to think about if we wanted to turn around, we got to look at what do we do with regulations as
We
well.
are being rapidly deregulated, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
Only for
You,
some-
you assume those regulations were for a good cause.
They're all for good cause. Every cause, lead paint, all for good cause. But it's driving up to a point that people can't afford it either.
A good presentation can demonstrate that although these may be different types of regulation, they will not necessarily be more burdensome. In fact, they should be less burdensome, right? That's one of the things that Jason King is.
One of the big things with the form-based code is an understanding that once you adhere to the forms, the standards contained in the landscaping, that the permitting process is more predictable. Because it's not pre-development plans, but you're articulating fairly clearly, build to this point, go this high, add this detail. We're not focusing on the uses or the noise or, is it a dentist or a lawyer's office? We've already said offices are okay. We've already said restaurants are okay. We've already factored in emissions and parking and everything. So it gives potentially the development community a more standard deliverable product, which they can realize that they can get permits in 3 to 4 months and not 3 to 4 years.
And to what Joe says, though, that might mean big companies from elsewhere coming in and buying that property because the person who owns it now can't afford to build to form base.
But no one's requiring them to, unless they choose to
Well,
redevelop.
they'll
their-
sell. Yeah, they'll sell to someone who can afford to build.
Or their heirs will do so. So, as
Yeah.
Jamie said, the next generation.
No, I've worked with a couple developers in Connecticut where, you know, you have, in a lot of family-owned development companies, there's a matriarch, but that matriarch is in their late 60s, 70s, and they don't want to take on debt, yet his daughter's daughter, who's starting in the company, is tear it down, let's rebuild it, because at 28, 32 years old, they're okay taking on $10 million worth of debt, because when they're 40, they're gonna start to see the return, but the matriarch is not gonna see the return because he worked for years paying off his father's debt. And now he's debt-free and revenue-heavy. So again, sometimes it's not necessarily someone from the outside, it's someone internal, it's just a different generation. And also in a different generational or a few years from now, there are different price points. You know, there was a different price point pre-COVID than post-COVID.
Mm.
You know, substantially, just in the construction industry.
Can we move on to planning board liaison activities? Does anyone have anything? Other than we need to reschedule our landscape subcommittee meeting at some point, perhaps last thing tonight. If there's nothing, update from staff, hopefully a very abbreviated,
Yeah.
CIP and budget
Just,
info.
there were no questions from the town council regarding the planning board, GIS, or the conservation commission's budget.
Great.
We have slight increases in our line items to allow us to kind of keep the lights on and continue to do work for the town and the planning board.
Good.
We're whole so far.
Andy, any update on legal issues?
Nope.
Okay.
Too early to tell.
Yes. Do we want to figure out,
We can talk.
okay, afterwards. So if there's nothing else, motion to,
No, we need TRC
Oh, TRC rep.
for tomorrow and for April, because we can't keep appointing our representative the night before the meeting. We can't get you materials for the meeting in advance.
Susan's going tomorrow.
Okay, Susan's tomorrow.
and
Because I'm a
then,
good sport that way.
and what was the other date?
You got the calendar up, Jamie?
Yeah.
April,
Maria, I won't be able to attend either meeting in April. I'll be on the road.
On the road again.
Utah.
you mean, regular and work session?
Both for, second Tuesday and last Tuesday of April.
April 8th
My
is the
birthday.
next TRC meeting
Oh.
after tomorrow's.
I'll do that one.
Liz? that was you?
Liz,
Okay.
great, thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Caper, second?
I'll second.
You said that, Robin?
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.